The phone line crackled with that familiar sharp edge my mother always used when she wanted control. Lauren, I am not asking you. I am telling you, Nancy is handling the family properties now, and you will stay out of it completely. Your name keeps coming up in conversations around town, and it is making things difficult for the rest of us. Nancy knows how to keep things quiet and respectable. I already signed the paperwork giving her authority this morning. Do not call her. Do not show up. This is for the best, and I do not want to hear another word about it. Hi, my name is Lauren Mitchell. I am 30 years old. I stood in the middle of the empty kitchen of a $3 million listing in North Raleigh, my tablet still open on the counter with the client's preferred lighting notes. The call had come in while I was adjusting the fresh flowers on the island. My mother's voice had been loud enough that the Bluetooth speaker on the counter picked up every word. I ended the call with one quick tap and slipped the phone into my blazer pocket before my hands could start shaking in front of the arriving clients. The front door opened 2 minutes later. Jordan Hale, my colleague from the brokerage, walked in with the couple who had flown in from Charlotte to see the house. Jordan gave me his usual easy smile, but his eyes flicked to my face for half a second longer than normal. He had heard something. I could tell by the way he kept the conversation moving while I tried to remember how to breathe normally. We walked the clients through the open floor plan. I pointed out the custom millwork and the heated floors, the same lines I had used 100 times before. Every sentence felt like it had to fight its way out of my throat. My mother had just handed the family's real estate decisions to Nancy Whitaker, the woman who had been at every birthday party and holiday dinner since I was 10. Nancy was not family. She was the friend my mother had always treated like a second daughter when it suited her. Now she was suddenly the one with authority. The showing ended with polite handshakes and a promise to follow up. The moment the door closed behind them, Jordan turned to me. "Everything okay? You looked like you saw a ghost halfway through the kitchen tour." I forced a small laugh that did not sound like mine. Just a family thing, nothing that affects the deal. He did not push, but the concern stayed on his face as he gathered his notes. I waited until he left before I let myself sit on one of the bar stools and pull out my phone again. 3 missed texts from my sister Emily had arrived while I was smiling for the clients. "Emily, Mom said you're not supposed to be involved with the Whitaker property anymore. Emily, Nancy already called the listing agent. Emily, just let it go, Lauren. You always make everything bigger than it needs to be." I read the messages twice. The second time, my vision blurred at the edges. My mother had not even waited an hour before telling my sister. She had probably told Nancy first. The same Nancy who used to slip me $20 bills at Christmas and tell me I was the smart one. I called my mother back. She answered on the first ring like she had been waiting. "I told you not to call me about this," she said before I could speak. Her voice had that tight, bright tone she used when she was already rewriting the story in her head. "You gave Nancy authority over family properties without telling me, properties that have my name on some of the older paperwork. Do you understand what that does to my license if something goes wrong?" She laughed a short, ugly sound. "Oh, please, Lauren. Your license. Always about your license and your reputation. Nancy has been steady for 30 years. You show up with your big deals and your opinions, and suddenly everyone in Raleigh is talking about how the Mitchell family can't keep things private. Nancy understands discretion. You have never understood when to stop pushing." I pressed my palm flat against the cold granite counter. "You already signed something this morning. Without asking me, I do not need your permission to protect this family," she snapped. "Nancy is going to list the old lake house next month. She will handle everything cleanly. You are not to contact the agent. You are not to contact Nancy. If anyone asks, you are taking some time to focus on your own clients. That is the story." The line went dead before I could answer. I sat there in the empty house until the automatic lights timed out and the kitchen went dark. My phone lit up again with a notification from the brokerage group chat. A message from one of the senior agents asked if anyone had heard about the Mitchell situation with the lake house. Someone else replied with a single question mark. No one tagged me, but the silence in the chat felt louder than any direct message. I drove back to my townhouse in the Five Points neighborhood with the windows down, even though the spring air was still cool. The whole way I kept hearing my mother's voice telling me my name was causing problems. The same voice that used to brag to her friends about her daughter, the top producer. The same voice that had asked me to quietly help with the lake house paperwork 2 years ago because Nancy doesn't understand the legal side like you do. Now Nancy had the authority and I had the warning to stay away. When I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang again. This time it was Marcus Rivera, the client I had been courting for 6 months for a waterfront property in Wake Forest. He was supposed to sign tomorrow. "Lauren, I'm going to have to push the signing," he said. His voice was careful, the kind of careful people use when they are repeating something they heard from someone else. I ran into Nancy Whitaker at the club this afternoon. She mentioned there might be some family complications on your end and suggested I wait until things settle. I trust her judgment. She's been around forever. I sat in my car with the engine still running and watched the automatic garage door open and close again because I had not pulled in. Marcus kept talking something about rescheduling in a couple of weeks, but I barely heard him. My mother had not just excluded me from one decision. She had let Nancy start spreading the idea that I was the complication. In a city where real estate ran on relationships and quiet referrals, that kind of whisper could move faster than any contract. I ended the call as politely as I could and walked inside. The house was quiet the way I usually liked it after a long day. Tonight, the quiet felt like it was pressing in from every side. I poured a glass of water I did not drink and stood at the kitchen island staring at the dark screen of my phone. Part of me wanted to drive straight to my parents' house and demand my mother explain herself in person. The louder part of me knew that would only give her more material to call me dramatic. She had already decided the story. I was the one who made things difficult. Nancy was the steady one. My sister Emily texted again while I was still standing there. "Emily, Mom is really upset you called her back. She said you're not respecting her decision. Nancy is trying to calm her down. Maybe just give it a few days." I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the old lake house file. My name was still listed as a contact on 2 of the older documents from when my grandfather had first put it in a trust. My mother had not removed me yet. She had simply told everyone who mattered that I no longer had a say. I closed the laptop and walked to the back window that looked out over the small shared courtyard. A light was on in the townhouse across from mine. I could see the silhouette of my neighbor moving around her kitchen. Normal life happening 20 feet away while mine had just been rearranged without my permission. I picked up my phone one more time and opened the text thread with Nancy Whitaker. We had not messaged in months. The last time had been her asking for a recommendation for a contractor. I had given her 3 names, and she had thanked me with a string of heart emojis. Now I typed one line. "Lauren, can we talk?" "My mother just told me you're handling the lake house." I watched the message sit there, the delivered status appearing almost immediately. The 3 dots that meant she was typing appeared then, disappeared, then appeared again. They stayed on the screen for a long time. When the reply finally came, it was only 2 sentences. "Nancy, your mother asked me to keep things simple. I think it's better if we don't discuss this right now. I hope you understand." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and turned off the kitchen light. In the dark, I could still hear my mother's voice from the earlier call, bright and certain, telling me this was for the best. I had spent the last 8 years building a reputation in this city on being the agent people could trust with complicated family properties. My mother had just told the one person who could damage that reputation the fastest that I was the problem, and she had done it before I even had time to finish one showing. I stood there in the dark kitchen and wondered how many other calls Nancy had already made. I left the phone face down on the counter and went upstairs, but the dark house felt smaller than usual. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Nancy's 2 polite sentences and my mother's bright, certain voice telling me this was for the best. The next morning, I was still in the same clothes when my phone lit up on the nightstand. Marcus Rivera had texted at 6:47 a.m. "Marcus, I'm sorry, Lauren. After thinking about it overnight, I'm going to pass on the Wake Forest property. Nancy made some good points about keeping things in the family for now. I hope there are no hard feelings." I read it twice, then a third time, sitting on the edge of the bed with the screen brightness turned all the way down. 6 months of work on that deal gone in one night because Nancy Whitaker had decided to keep things in the family. My mother had not just excluded me from one decision. She had let Nancy start pulling clients away from me. I showered, put on the navy blazer I always wore for serious meetings, and drove to the brokerage office in downtown Raleigh instead of my usual first showing. Jordan Hale was already at his desk when I walked in. He looked up, saw my face, and stood up without being asked. "Conference room," he said quietly. "Now." We closed the door. Jordan did not sit. He leaned against the table and crossed his arms. "3 agents have asked me this morning if everything is okay with your family," he said. "One of them said they heard Nancy Whitaker is taking over some Mitchell properties and that you might be stepping back. I told them it was probably just gossip." Was I lying? I stayed standing too. My mother gave Nancy authority over the lake house yesterday without telling me. Nancy has already started calling people. Marcus Rivera just pulled out of a 6-month deal because Nancy made some good points. Jordan let out a low breath. That's not gossip. That's targeted. You need to talk to the broker before this spreads any further. If clients start thinking there's drama attached to working with you, it won't stay small. I nodded. My hands were steady, even though my chest felt tight. I'm going to her office right now. The managing broker, a woman named Diane, who had built the firm from nothing, listened without interrupting while I laid out exactly what had happened. When I finished, she tapped one finger on her desk for a long moment. I received a call yesterday afternoon, she said, from your mother. She wanted to know if there was any way to protect the family name if any future transactions involved you. I told her we don't discuss agents with outside parties. She hung up on me. The room felt smaller. My mother had not only gone to Nancy, she had called my brokerage. She had tried to plant doubt with a person who could affect my entire income. Diane leaned forward. Lauren, I like you. You're one of the cleanest agents we have. But if this turns into clients pulling out because they think working with you creates family drama, I have to protect the firm. Document everything. If Nancy or your mother contacts anyone else here, I want to know immediately. And maybe take a couple of days off the floor until we see how this settles. I left her office with my shoulders straight and my folder of notes under my arm. The moment I reached my car, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. I heard you went running to your boss, she said before I could speak. Her voice had that high, brittle edge it got when she was already rewriting the story. Diane called Nancy this morning. She wanted to know why I was interfering. Nancy had to calm her down. Do you see what you're doing? You're dragging other people into this. I went to Diane because you called my brokerage and tried to undermine me, I said. My voice stayed level. You gave Nancy authority over property that still has my name on legal documents. You let her contact my clients. What did you expect me to do? She laughed short and sharp. I expected you to act like an adult for once instead of making everything about you. Nancy has been loyal to this family for decades. She doesn't question every decision I make. She doesn't turn every conversation into a fight about her reputation. You have always been like this, Lauren, always needing to be the important one. Nancy understands that sometimes you have to put the family first. The words landed exactly where she wanted them to. I felt the old, familiar sting and pushed it down. I am putting my license and my clients first, I said, because you decided my name was suddenly a liability. Your name has always been a liability when you refuse to listen, she snapped. Nancy would never have gone to your boss. Nancy would have respected my decision and stayed quiet. You can't even do that. You have to make a scene. She hung up before I could answer. I sat in the parking garage with the engine off and watched the time on the dashboard change from 10:12 to 10:13. My hands were still steady. My breathing was still even. But something inside my chest had started to crack open. I drove to the lake house anyway. I did not have authority anymore, but I still had the old gate code. The place looked the same as it always had, quite a little overgrown at the edges, the dock stretching out over the water. I parked on the gravel and walked around the back. The real estate sign was already in the yard. Nancy's name was on it in clean professional letters. Mine was nowhere. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Jordan. Jordan, just got a call from one of your past clients. They saw the lake house listing with Nancy's name and wanted to know if you were okay. I told them you were fine. They still asked 3 times. Another text came in while I was reading that one. This one from Emily. Emily, Mom is crying. She said you went to the lake house even though she told you not to. Nancy is there now trying to calm her down. Why are you making this so hard on everyone? I typed nothing back. I walked down to the dock and stood at the end where the water lapped against the wood. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. For a minute, I let myself remember every summer we had spent here when I was younger, before my mother decided my success made the family look like they needed help, before Nancy became the safe choice. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number with a local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Lauren Mitchell. The voice was male professional clipped. This is David Lang with Lang & Associates. We represent the buyer group that was in contract on the Wake Forest property with Marcus Rivera. Mr. Rivera informed us this morning that he is withdrawing. He cited family complications on the seller side. We're going to need to release the earnest money and terminate. I wanted to confirm with you directly before we file the paperwork. The dock felt unsteady under my feet, even though it was bolted to concrete pilings. I wasn't aware Marcus had already contacted his attorney, I said. My voice sounded far away. Can you tell me exactly what he said about the family complications? There was a short pause. He said the family had asked him to step back because there was some disagreement about who was authorized to sell. He mentioned a woman named Nancy Whitaker had reached out to him personally and suggested it would be cleaner if he waited. I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell. This is becoming more common than you'd think with family properties. I'll send the termination over this afternoon. He hung up. I stayed on the dock until the sun moved and the shadows stretched long across the water. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and drove toward the office again. I did not cry. I did not call my mother back. I did not text Nancy or Emily or anyone else. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing a timeline. Every call, every text, every client who had pulled away, every word my mother had said about Nancy being the steady one and me being the problem. By the time I reached the brokerage, the document was 3 pages long. Jordan was waiting near my desk. He took one look at my face and followed me into the small kitchen at the back of the office without being asked. Marcus Rivera's attorney just called me, I said. The deal is dead. Nancy reached out to him directly. My mother called the managing broker yesterday. 3 agents have already asked you if I'm okay. This is not going to stay quiet. Jordan poured 2 cups of coffee even though neither of us drank them. What are you going to do? I looked at the timeline on my phone. Then I looked at him. I'm going to keep showing up, I said. And I'm going to document every single thing they do next. Because if this keeps spreading, I'm not losing my license over my mother's need to feel in control. He nodded once, slow and serious. Then I've got your back on the floor, whatever that looks like. My phone buzzed again on the counter between us. Another text, this one from a number I did not recognize. Unknown. Hey Lauren, it's been a while. Heard there might be some changes with the Mitchell family properties. If you're stepping back from certain listings, I'd love to chat about picking up the slack. No pressure, just putting it out there. I showed Jordan the message. He read it and his mouth tightened. That's the 3rd one I've seen like that today, he said. People are circling already. I locked the phone and slid it into my pocket. The timeline document was still open on the screen. 3 pages and growing. Outside the kitchen window, the Raleigh skyline looked the same as it had yesterday. Inside the office, everything I had built was starting to shift under my feet because my mother had decided Nancy Whitaker was the safer choice for the family name. I picked up the coffee I was not going to drink and took one slow sip. Then my phone rang again. This time the caller ID said Helen Mitchell. I stared at the screen for 3 full rings before I answered. The phone was still ringing. I answered on the 4th ring. Lauren. My mother's voice came through tight and bright, the way it always did when she had already decided how the conversation would end. I heard you went to the lake house. Nancy is very upset. She had to explain to the neighbors why you were there without permission. I went to look at a property that still has my name on 2 of the trust documents, I said. I kept my voice even. Documents you never removed before you gave Nancy authority. She let out a short, sharp breath. There you go again. Making everything about paperwork and your name. Nancy has been nothing but respectful. She called Marcus Rivera because she was trying to protect the family from more drama. You are the one who made him pull out by refusing to step back gracefully. Marcus pulled out because Nancy told him there were family complications and suggested he wait, I said. That is not protection. That is interference. My mother's tone shifted in an instant, the brightness cracking into something colder. You have always been so dramatic, Lauren. Always turning a simple family decision into a war. Nancy would never have gone running to your boss. Nancy would have accepted that sometimes the family needs one person to take the lead. You cannot stand not being the center of everything. The words hit exactly where she aimed them. I felt the old reflex to explain myself rise, and I pushed it back down. I am not fighting for the center, I said. I am protecting my license. You called my brokerage. You let Nancy contact my clients. You handed over properties that still carry my name. I am done participating in whatever story you and Nancy are telling about me. There was a pause. Then her voice changed again, softer this time, almost pleading. Lauren, please. The lake house deal is important. Nancy made a mistake with the paperwork, and now the buyers are asking questions. If you could just talk to them, explain that it was a family misunderstanding. I closed my eyes for half a second. This was the chaotic pivot I had learned to expect. 1 minute, I was the problem. The next minute, I was the only one who could fix it. No, I said. The word came out quiet, but final. I am removing my name from every remaining family document. I am telling my brokerage I will not touch any Mitchell or Whitaker property. And I am telling you that I will not be available for family real estate matters anymore. Not the lake house, not anything else. The softness vanished. You are abandoning your family because you cannot handle not being in charge. Nancy was right about you. She said you would make this ugly the second you felt slighted. I am choosing not to let your chaos cost me my career, I said. That is not abandonment. That is a boundary. She laughed a brittle sound that cracked at the end. Boundaries. That is what people say when they want to punish the people who raised them. Your father is heartbroken. Emily is crying. Nancy is trying to clean up the mess you made. And you are sitting there talking about boundaries like you are the victim. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply said I am done with this conversation. Do not call me about family properties again. If there is a legal issue with my name still being on documents, my attorney will handle it. Otherwise, we are finished here. I ended the call before she could answer. The office kitchen was empty. I stood there for a long minute with the phone still in my hand, feeling the weight of what I had just done settle into my chest. I had drawn the line. I had meant it, and the cost was already clear. I had just walked away from every future referral that might have come through family connections in Raleigh. In a business built on relationships that was not a small thing, Jordan found me a few minutes later. He did not ask what happened. He just handed me a fresh cup of coffee and said, "Diane wants to see the timeline you started. She said if this keeps escalating, she will back you on any formal complaint." I nodded. I am going to send her the updated version tonight, and I am going to start pulling my name from anything that still ties me to the lake house. He studied my face for a second. "You sure?" "I am sure," I said. "Because if I keep one foot in that door, my mother will keep using it to pull me back in every time Nancy makes a mistake, or my sister needs something smoothed over." The next 2 weeks moved in a strange, suspended rhythm. I showed houses. I closed 2 deals that had nothing to do with my family. I met with my attorney and signed the paperwork to remove my name from the old trust documents. Every time my phone rang with a Raleigh number, I did not recognize my stomach tightened until I saw it was a new client or another agent. My sister Emily texted twice. Both messages were variations of the same thing: Mom is really struggling. Nancy is doing her best, but she is not you. Can you just talk to her one more time? I did not answer either one. My father never called. On the 3rd week, I ran into Sarah Klein, a client I had worked with 2 years earlier on a downtown condo. She stopped me outside a coffee shop near the Capitol. I heard there was some family drama with the lake house. She said, her voice careful. "Nancy Whitaker called me last week asking if I knew anyone looking for waterfront. I told her I already had an agent I trusted. She got quiet after that. I kept my expression neutral." "Thank you for saying that." Sarah hesitated. "For what it is worth, most people who have actually worked with you know the difference between family gossip and the truth. The ones who listen to Nancy are usually the ones who never had to close a complicated deal with you." It was the first small piece of ground that did not feel like it was shifting under me. Then the ironic twist arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a voicemail from David Lang, the attorney who had represented Marcus Rivera. "Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to give you a heads up. The lake house buyers withdrew their offer yesterday. Apparently, Nancy Whitaker made a representation about clear title that turned out to be inaccurate. The buyers are now exploring whether they have grounds for a claim. Your name came up in their attorney's initial review because it was still on one of the older trust documents. I advised them you had already removed yourself from any involvement. I thought you should know. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. 2 days later, my mother called from a new number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered, "Lauren." Her voice was hoarse, like she had been crying or shouting. The deal fell apart. Nancy made a mistake with the disclosures. "The buyers are threatening to sue. I need you to talk to them. Just explain that it was a family misunderstanding and that you were never really involved." I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and felt the old reflex rise again, the one that wanted to fix it so the shouting would stop. "I already told you I am not involved," I said. "I removed my name. I told my brokerage I will not touch it. I am not going to call the buyers or their attorney." "You are really going to let this happen to your family?" Her voice cracked. "After everything we did for you, Nancy is beside herself. She thought she was helping. I felt the heaviness settle in my chest, familiar and final. I am sorry the deal fell apart, I said, but I am not the person who can fix it for you anymore. I hope you and Nancy figure it out. She started to say something else, something sharp and familiar about how selfish I was being, but I ended the call before she could finish. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and updated the timeline document one last time. Then I created a new folder on my laptop labeled Simply Family, Do Not Engage. I moved every text, every email, every note about the lake house into it. I did not delete them. I just stopped looking. Over the next month, the whispers in real estate circles slowed down. Some people still asked Jordan careful questions. A few clients who had heard the story from Nancy's side quietly went elsewhere. I lost 2 potential referrals that would have come through old family connections. I gained 3 new clients who had no idea who Helen Mitchell or Nancy Whitaker were, and who cared only that I closed cleanly and kept my word. My sister Emily stopped texting. My father never reached out. My mother sent one more message 2 weeks after the lake house deal collapsed. It was short. Helen, I hope you are happy with what you did to this family. I did not answer. I blocked the number. On a quiet Thursday evening in early summer, I stood in the kitchen of a house I had just closed for Sarah Klein and her husband. The new owners were still at the title company signing final papers. I was alone in the empty rooms, checking that the lights were off and the doors were locked. The house smelled like fresh paint and the lemon cleaner the stagers had used. My phone buzzed with a notification from the brokerage group chat. Someone had posted a photo of the old lake house. The sign was gone. The dock looked smaller than I remembered. The caption said the property was back on the market with a new price and a new agent. I looked at the photo for a long moment. Then I turned off the screen, finished locking the house, and drove home. The freedom did not feel like victory. It felt like the quiet that comes after you finally put down something heavy you were never supposed to be carrying in the first place. My mother still told her version of the story to anyone who would listen. Nancy still moved through the same social circles, still presented herself as the steady one who had tried to help. My sister still sided with them. My father still stayed silent. Nothing about them had changed. What had changed was me. I no longer waited for the next phone call that would rearrange my day or my reputation. I no longer explained myself to people who had already decided I was the problem. I no longer measured my success by whether my mother could finally be proud of it without feeling threatened. Some mornings, I still woke up with the old ache in my chest, the one that wanted the version of my family where I belonged without having to shrink. I let the ache exist. Then I got up, made coffee, and went to work for clients who had never asked me to be smaller. That was the choice I made. It cost me the last threads of a family I had spent years trying to earn my way back into. It cost me referrals and quiet respect in certain rooms in Raleigh. It did not cost me the career I had built or the peace I had finally decided I was allowed to keep. I chose myself. And I learned that sometimes the people who should have been your safest place will turn your success into the reason they push you out. When that happens, the only power you have left is the power to stop explaining and start protecting what you built anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. If your own mother had turned the one thing you were proud of into the weapon she used to push you out of your own life, would you have kept trying to fix it, or would you have chosen the painful relief of walking away? I would really like to know what you would have done.